Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to TACIR. We will go ahead and resume our agenda for the day. I believe that we are on the last item of the day, except for other business, and that item is tab 7, a panel discussion that has been put together by Hannah Newcomb. Ms. Newcomb, will you come up, and if you'll bring your panelists up here and get them seated, we'll get started. Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Oh, good. Okay. Good. I thought you guys were all on the front row, but well, you are, so to speak. So good. If we can, then we'll start over here to my left and make sure that you speak clearly into the mic. And the mic is not working unless you have it's red. And when you're through speaking, turn yourself off so someone else can speak. But if we'll start over here, introduce yourself, and then we'll let Hannah. Do you want to do the introductory remarks now, or before we introduce the panelists, or?
I can go ahead. I have a little update on it.
All right. Well, you'll have more time, ladies and gentlemen, to savor the words of your introductions. So please get us started, Hannah.
Okay, great. Well, thank you, Chairman, and good afternoon, Commissioners. So we have tab 7. This is our study on housing juvenile offenders. After the memo in your docket book, there's materials that the panelists provided. So they'll be referring to them throughout, and you can look, on the copy in front of you. So Public Chapter 418, Acts of 2025, directs the Commission to study the current availability of housing, detention, and treatment facilities across the state for juveniles who have been adjudicated delinquent and committed to the Department of Children's Services, or who have been detained by the juvenile court prior to an adjudicatory hearing, and whether there is need for additional capacity. Facilities for housing and treating juvenile offenders are important components of Tennessee's juvenile justice system. But if available capacity doesn't meet the need for placements, it could present risks to the welfare of youth in custody and the general public. Youth detained prior to their adjudicatory hearing are placed in juvenile detention centers, which in Tennessee are operated by either local governments, including juvenile courts, or private entities. These facilities are intended for short-term placements, typically less than 30 days. There are at least 3 juvenile detention centers in each Grand Division of the state, but not every county has its own facility. In counties without their own juvenile detention centers, judges and sheriffs report having to transport youth across county lines, and sometimes even across the state, to find an available pre-adjudication detention bed. Youth who have been adjudicated delinquent may, at the discretion of the juvenile judge, be committed to DCS custody. Once that occurs, DCS determines where to place the child based on the severity of the offense and the child's behavioral, medical, or other treatment needs. DCS has a network of providers, including one state-operated secure residential facility that it uses to house and treat children in its custody. Housing and treatment options for juvenile offenders in DCS custody range from foster homes to secure residential facilities. The latter are generally classified as either staff secure or hardware secure based on their operations. Juvenile offenders placed in hardware secure facilities are typically those who have committed more serious offenses and require more security. There are times when DCS will place children in its custody in juvenile detention centers or other temporary placements, including assessment centers, until it can find an open bed for long-term placement in an appropriate secure facility. For today's panel, you will hear from 6 stakeholders about the state of housing, detention, and treatment capacity for juveniles, both pre- and post-adjudication in Tennessee. And we have here today with us Robert Filial, the juvenile court judge for Hamilton County, Andrew Brigham, the general sessions court judge for Stewart County, Sheila Calloway, the juvenile court judge for Davidson County, Christy Little, the general sessions court judge for Madison County, Jim Lehman, the executive director of legislation for the Tennessee Department of Children's Services, and Matt Yancey, the Deputy Commissioner of Behavioral Health Community Programs for the Tennessee Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse Services. Lastly, staff invited Tennessee Voices, a nonprofit which provides services to juvenile justice involved youth and their families, to participate on the panel, but representatives for the organization were unable to attend because of a scheduling conflict. Staff plan to present a draft report for review and comment at the commission's next meeting. And without anything further, the panelists can introduce themselves.
I think you did very well. You're saving almost all the two judges. As you begin your remarks, please introduce yourself and to us. And I believe that we have someone has spoken to you about the time limitations on your individual presentation. We appreciate your cooperation and look forward to hearing from you, Judge.
Thank you, Chairman Yeager, and thank you all, and welcome to our world. We're glad you're lifting the sheet a little bit and taking a look at in our world and what we do. And we thank this whole panel, this work, and especially Hannah and her team for work in this process so far. I am Rob Filial. I'm the judge of the Hamilton County Juvenile Court in Chattanooga. I'm also the chair of the Tennessee Commission on Children and Youth. And I'm the president, and more importantly for today, I'm the president of the Tennessee Council of Juvenile and Family Court Judges, and we're here representing that body in part today. Our conference today is represented by our immediate past president to my left, Judge Eddie Brigham of Stewart County, our vice president, Judge Sheila Calloway of Davidson County, our longtime executive committee member, Judge Christy Little of Madison County. They're each going to be, of course, speaking to you. This issue, though, I want you to know is very important to every member of our conference. Many who have been in the trenches for years and have expressed their struggles in finding placements for juveniles from their respective counties. So just be assured that we're four of many in our conference position is that there is certainly a need for additional capacity across the state for juvenile housing. A lot of judges, more than us, but a lot of judges have met with these working groups during these discussions during your work and have shared both data, hard data, and a lot of anecdotal evidence of real world application of the laws at Tennessee that some of you all pass that necessitate or require detention of juveniles and the struggles that are experienced in trying to do that. And we provided some of that data as an exhibit, and I hope you all have that. The data for juvenile courts is not perfect. It's better than I'd say it's better than it's probably ever been, and it's gotten better in the last few years. We're looking at apples and oranges now instead of mixing the fruits, and so we're getting better there, and thanks to a lot of help from the legislator to help us get there. Again, we welcome and thank you for this impartial, research-based work that we believe will confirm the dire need for juvenile housing. In just a moment, Judge Brigham is going to talk about the nuts and bolts of detention of juveniles and some trends that we're seeing. Judge Calloway is going to talk about what we can and can't do regarding alternatives to detention that we all look for. We all look for alternatives to having to lock a child up wherever feasible and safe for the youth and for the community. And then Judge Little is going to talk about the needs generally that apply to the whole state and about the western part of the state, particularly where she's gathered letters of testimony of judges throughout that part of the state citing their needs and experiences. What you'll see in here is that some of our counties have access to a county-run local detention center, but most do not, and then have to struggle to find and pay for and transport to and from other counties. And I believe you'll find that most all of those detention units are old and outdated, including the one where after an earthquake, it was reported there were minor injuries. Okay, I'll stop. With that, I'll pass it on down to Judge Brigham.
Thank you, Judge Filial. My name is Andy Brigham. I'm the General Sessions and Juvenile Court Judge in Stewart County, a very small county. Our population is between 14 and 15,000. I've been the judge there for almost 23 years. detention overview. Most of the time, what we're talking about when we're talking about detention is pre-adjudication. You might think of that as bail in the adult world. Two primary considerations: risk of flight and public safety. The bail setting magistrate or the juvenile court judge must take that into account when deciding whether or not to detain a child. But most of our detention needs are for pre-adjudication. When something happens and we don't know what the situation is, and we need to have a cooling off period, very much like domestic violence, 12-hour and 24-hour holds on the adult side. Sometimes we need a place to put children until we determine whether or not they truly pose a risk. So we're talking about pre-adjudication primarily. That is a county expense. My county has contracts with 6 juvenile detention centers, and they're all about $250 a day. My county's budget for detention is $5,000, so we can run through that, pretty quickly. I had a murder suspect detained for about 8 months, and well, you can imagine how much money that was. I had to go before the county commission and ask for more money. They gave it, but that's kind of what we're looking at. Also, there's post-adjudication detention needs. The law does allow a juvenile court judge to detain a child after adjudication. That is rarely done in my experience. Most of the post-adjudication detentions are done through DCS. We have a gate system here in juvenile court. We are the gatekeepers. We commit children to DCS custody. Then it's up to them to decide where to place the child. And so that's the bulk of post-adjudication detention decisions are made by DCS. And I think that will become apparent as we go forward. There is a hybrid. If a child is on probation and commits a certain offense, then the judge does have the authority to detain that child. So that's kind of a post-adjudication, pre-adjudication hybrid situation, and that happens fairly often. The detained youth is entitled to a detention hearing within 72 hours. There's an additional procedural safeguard built into that hearing, not present in the adult system, and that is we have to find probable cause that the child committed that crime. So we have that procedural safeguard added into the detention hearing. There are some new trends that are affecting detention, serious youthful offenders. I don't know if you all are aware of that, but now, believe it or not, juvenile court judges have the authority to sentence a child past the age of 19 up until the age of 23 and 24 in the adult system. Before that child can be placed in on the serious youthful offender track, that child is entitled to a jury trial. This is new. This law just became effective January the 1st of this year, and the SYO cases are starting to pop up. Not so much in Dover, in Stewart County, small, but they are popping up. In fact, in Davidson County, they had their first SYO case, I think like 4 hours after it became effective on January the 1st. So these cases are popping up. If the child wants a jury trial, then the child can be detained pending that jury trial. Think about how long it takes to get before a jury these days. Just think about that. So and we haven't seen that yet, but if I'm a defense lawyer and the DA doesn't offer me a good deal for my client, I'm going to insist on a jury trial. I'm going to try to fight this thing as much as I can. So there's a possibility that child may be in detention for several months awaiting a jury trial. The interstate compact on juveniles. If a juvenile comes from outside the state, a runaway, a fugitive from outside the state, then we are required to detain that juvenile for up to 90 days. Of course, we're bordered by a whole bunch of states, and so that does happen, especially in the areas like in Gatlinburg and places where there's a lot of visitors. That happens. School threats. School threats are a big deal. When I started this job 20 some odd years ago, I didn't even know what that was. I took the bench just right after Columbine and knew that had happened, but it hadn't happened here. Well, folks, it's happening here. We're getting school threats. If Dover is getting school threats, then they're happening all over the state. And so a lot of judges and a lot of courts, myself included, will detain a juvenile on a school threat until we figure out what's going on, whether the threat is real or not. I have a couple of anecdotes for you. I'm a part-time judge. I owned a hardware store for 34 years. As part of my hardware store, I was a gun dealer. I sold guns for 34 years. I know what a rifle looks like. Just about 3 or 4 months ago, we had a Ring camera video sent to us by the police, and it showed this kid with a rifle with a scope pointing the rifle at a passing school bus, and the school bus was full of kids. I wanted to detain that kid because I didn't know what was going on. We tried 6 places and didn't get in. So that child went home that night under a whole lot of safety precautions and stuff. But I really wanted to put that child in detention until I could figure out what was going on. It turned out that the rifle was an air rifle, but it shot at 1,300 feet per second, which is more than a .22. And it's the velocity that kills, not necessarily the size of the bullet. About 2 months ago, we had an aggravated burglary where a child broke into a person's home, and I wanted to detain that child because there was a firearm involved. No bed available. We had to do something else. Last night, as my wife and I were enjoying our truffle fries at a restaurant, I got a call, and a young lady, pointed a loaded gun at the face of her mother. I wanted to detain that child if things didn't calm down, but they went into the home, I was told later, and took the gun, took the child and put it with a relative, and so there was no need to detain. So that's the kind of things that we're looking at. We did have a stolen car and a DUI about a month ago. This youth was already on probation. I'm very familiar with the child's family. I knew his grandfather who died of alcoholism. I knew his father who committed suicide and was an alcoholic. His uncle is in my general sessions court, and I've got him in jail right now on drug charges. And so I know this kid doesn't have much of a chance. And so when he stole that car and wrecked it, I wanted to detain that child. We did find a bed there. It wasn't in Davidson County, thank you, but we did find a bed. But we had to wait 8 hours to get the kid, and it was a 2-hour drive to the detention center. So these are some of the kinds of things that are real world that are happening. Again, if they're happening in a county of 14,000 people, I guarantee you, I bet you a hot fudge sundae, they're happening all across the state. Thank you.
Thank you. I am Sheila Calloway, the juvenile court judge in Nashville, Tennessee, right here in this place. And I am here today to talk to you about alternatives to detention. So we as judges see young people every day who make poor decisions in a moment. And the question before us is not whether we should hold them accountable, it's how we should hold them accountable, and what can we do that protects the community while giving that child a chance to get back on track. And so what we choose actually matters, because the wrong choice could absolutely entrench that young person deeper into our systems or give them the real opportunity to change their course. So when I sit on the bench, I don't want to guess about that child's risk or about that child's needs, just as Judge Brigham was talking about. That's why we use validated risk assessment tools. That helps us to distinguish whether that child is just doing something impulsive, but is at low risk, or whether that child is truly poses a danger to our community if not closely supervised. So what that means is a 15-year-old who's shoplifted and has no prior arrest can be diverted quickly to community services, or as Judge Brigham was talking about some of the examples, these people who are facing violent charges absolutely need to be held until we can figure out what the next steps are. So the assessments that we use make us smarter. They let us prioritize detention for those who actually need it and to direct the interventions to those that are at low risk of reoffending. Secondly, our partnerships with community organizations are not soft on crime, they're smart on outcomes. And so programs like restorative justice, individual family therapy, our credible messenger violence interruption programs, and mentoring help to keep our kids in school, in jobs, safely in the community, and out of our detention cells. So community connection is what keeps our youth out of trouble. So we see connecting youth to better holistic community connections as part of our job. When we give our youth structure and support outside the courthouse walls, the community sees the benefit and the community is safer. And so we also use diversion as a alternative. So most of our low risk cases should not be in the courtrooms. Every unnecessary court appearance eats up our judicial time, family time, and taxpayer money, and often makes outcomes for our youth worse. And so our diversion programs are important so that we can redirect the youth each year into services that work better and cost less. And so diversion is not letting our youth off the hook. It's holding them accountable in ways that build responsibility without unnecessary court expenses. And finally, alternatives to detention are practical ideals and ease capacity issues. So as someone who has to balance full dockets with a limited number of detention beds, I can tell you that we need more than just the concrete and steel beds. We need flexible alternatives that are evidence-based and community anchored. So for instance, we need more services like intensive home services. We need trained therapists who work directly with our families several times a week. These models have national data showing that they reduce reoffending. We need day treatment alternative schools for our youth, educational and behavioral supports in structured settings so that our youth don't fall behind while their cases are pending. We need restorative justice and other programs such as that we're already using here in Davidson County. These programs work directly to those who are victimized and the victims of the crimes, and they make accountability for our youth visible and meaningful. So every one of the alternatives for us, at our cost, is $453.70 per day to house a youth in our detention facility. It reduces reoffending most effectively for most of the youth. And these will free up our detention spaces for the high-risk youth who absolutely need it. And so as a judge, I see the faces behind the children and behind the numbers. Our challenge is balancing safety today and safety tomorrow. Alternatives to detention are not a luxury. They are a necessity if we want safer neighborhoods, healthier families, and fewer young people graduating from our youth justice system to our adult criminal system. We have to have more alternatives as well. Thank you.
Wow, what an honor. I've never had this opportunity before, so I appreciate you spending your time listening to us. My name is Christy Little, and I've been a judge for 27 years and a magistrate for 4 years prior to that, and I'm only 40, so it's just absolutely amazing. Very young prodigy, but all right. I was sworn in 27 years ago as the judge, and my dreams had finally come true because I had a dream to help children in crisis. The day they began court, it was a surprise to me. It wasn't exactly what I thought and what I saw on TV. I thought that I would have some time to prepare to be a judge. Before I walked into court, my predecessor, Judge Walter Baker Harris, I don't know if any of you are familiar with him, maybe in Tipton County, he took me into his chambers, then my chambers, and he gave me one of his many words of wisdom. He said that a judge, and he said especially you, Christy, cannot have a bad day or make a mistake. Then he really got to me. He said sternly, the decisions you make today can change a child, a family, or a beloved community, our community, forever. Wow. Every morning I pray for the wisdom to carry this mandate through each and every day. The juvenile court system in our state is in crisis. We have 27 years ago, I would have never dreamed of requesting and asking for more detention beds, you see, because I ran on prevention before detention. And I would love to get back to that. We have serious juvenile offenders that are too dangerous to remain in our communities now, as we see every single day. It is heartbreaking to me to see the rise in children sentenced for heinous crimes. Many of these children had lives fractured by untreated mental health issues, physical abuse, and lack of parental involvement. It's getting worse and worse. For more children, gangs have replaced positive influences. Our panel is here today in crisis mode asking for your help in intervening. More beds are needed for children whose offenses make them a risk to others and are in need of help and inpatient treatment. Evidence from judges' letters. I received a letter from every judge. We have a contract in our facility which has 8 beds. So from the Tennessee River to Shelby County, we have 8 beds and then 3 in McDowell. So we have 11 beds in West Tennessee. 11 beds. And Tipton County, I know the mayor knows how difficult that is to have to take a child to Johnson City to place them. And that's simply because we don't have the space and our numbers are going up. And our facility was hit by a tornado and is off its foundation, so could close at any time, which would leave no beds for that part of our state. Many of these serious offenders are too dangerous to remain in our communities. And we are faced with many heartbreaking decisions with this rise. Our panel is here today asking for more help. Evidence from the letters of every single judge is in your packet. Statistics and maps show beds are unavailable, especially for pre-adjudicatory beds in rural areas in West Tennessee. The lack of pre- and post-adjudicatory services, as explained, leaves children on a path toward homelessness, which we see, and I know you heard about this morning, untreated mental health needs, and sadly, no hope. The state is unique in that every region has different needs. This new concept of working in regional settings is a novel change. It will allow judges, youth service officers, DCS workers, mental health workers, and others to get together to stop those current trends and focus on prevention. Children seem to know before we do what the next trend is, and we're always trying to catch up with them. We need to work harder to keep up with the problem. It is our hope that all 3 regions of our state can collaborate to address current problems and avoid future problems in their counties. This would be a first for the state of Tennessee and any state in the 50 states to have regional centers. And this would be something that we would be more than happy to share our many hours of work. The Western region is in desperate need for pre-adjudicatory beds, as the Middle and Eastern Tennessee may have other needs, such as mental health facilities, treatment facilities, pre and post. We want to thank TACIR. I cannot imagine the Hannah Newcomb, thank you. Nate Pettit, thank you. And the dearest friend I'll ever have in the world, Senator Jackson, from all my heart, thank you. Senator Rose, and then Senator Yeager. I haven't had the good fortune to actually meet you, but I've heard wonderful things about TACIR and look forward to working in some collaborative effort with all of you. Representative Littleton and Representative Moody will be the representatives that will be presenting a bill to the legislature if you find that there is a need. Today, the issue is there a need for more beds in the state of Tennessee? With what we have now, I don't see in what's in front of you, it would be difficult to find not. If we'd spend more money on our children and less money on building prisons, I think we'd be in a whole lot better shape. Just remember, as I always will, that the decision you make today, September the 18th, 2025, could change a child, a family, or your communities forever. Please help us support the need for more beds for our youth in Tennessee. Please, I beg you. This will require funding in this legislative session, which will be critical to our state as we deal with crime and mental health, which is what I see to be the next trend in spending. God bless our children. We ask that you help provide the buildings and services needed to save them by helping us by finding the need to, in order for the bill to pass that we have pending, that we have a huge need, obviously, that exists for pre and post adjudicatory beds. So prevention can now avoid detention once again. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman and Commission members. My name is Jim Lehman. I'm the Legislative Director for the Department of Children's Services. I won't focus too much time on the pre-adjudication detention side, as the judges have done such a good job here of talking about that process. Our main involvement as DCS on the pre-adjudication side is we serve as the licensing authority for the state's juvenile detention centers and temporary holding resources. So we have 16 juvenile detention centers across the state. And I say we, not us, but the counties and juvenile courts do. And 4 temporary holding resources. So I'll just read those off just so that you know kind of where they are across the state, because again, that's only 20 counties with these types of facilities. Madison County, Williamson County, Davidson County, Putnam County, Scott County, Knox County, Washington County, Sevier, Blount, Ray, Bradley, Hamilton, Bedford, Rutherford, Shelby, and Dyer County. So those are where all of the juvenile detention centers are located across the state. The temporary holding resources, we have 4, and they are in Cumberland, Hamblin, Loudoun, and Sumner County. So I know the committee is focused on capacity. I added up all of the beds as far as the juvenile detention centers. It adds up to about 636 beds, if that's helpful for you all. And temporary holding resources is a category where the county can hold up to 72 hours. Those are at about 15 beds if you total all 4 of those up. So again, we serve as the licensing authority for those facilities. So members of our licensing team visit them on a regular basis to assess their compliance with licensing standards and rules, and work with them on any corrective action or on any deficiencies that could be noted. I'll move over to the post-adjudication side. So when children are adjudicated delinquent for committing offenses, depending on the number and or types of offenses, they can be committed to DCS custody, as the judges have talked about. DCS, we call these juvenile justice commitments. And so some fairly current numbers here. As of September 8th, we had 606 juvenile justice youth in custody. So of those 606, 145 were in a hardware secure facility, which is our most secure placement. 215 were in a staff secure facility. 40 were in a juvenile detention center facility. And the remainder were in community placement, trial home visit, or a few different other placement categories. So these numbers go up and down every day. But the first chart I have here shows our total juvenile justice custody trends over the last 5 years. So it's pretty hard to make out there, but the yellow line is best to see. That is by far the lowest number. That's 2021. You can see there was actually a downward trend of total kids in custody. But since then, fairly flat. The 24 got as high as 639 kids in custody, whereas we're a gray line that's kind of hard to see in 2025, but 606 kids, as of this month, as far as juvenile justice kids in DCS custody. Next, I wanted to share some information about the types of facilities that we use to house kids that are in juvenile justice custody. I won't go over every single one of these, but you can see here where those are situated across the state. Again, these are kids that are committed to DCS custody. So with the first two there, Walnut and Rosewood are in Davidson County, kind of near the airport. They are run by YOI, so that is a provider that we work with to staff those facilities. As you can see, Walnut is for females, Rosewood is for males, and the capacities listed there. If you go through the capacities, and that current date is as of September 6th, you can see that they're pretty close to capacity on most of these places. A couple of exceptions there. Rockdale in the bottom right corner, that is a facility in Texas that we use from time to time. We have not had as many kids in there recently. So on September 6th, there weren't any kids at the Rockdale facility. But each of these, it says, whether or not this is a staff secure facility or a hardware secure facility, and the capacity for each of those. And then again, on September 6th, how many juvenile justice commitment kids we had at those facilities. For the most part, these are facilities house just Tennessee specific youth, Tennessee juvenile justice youth. They will, however, occasionally have a youth from a nearby state. If you total all of the capacity of all these facilities, that adds up to 425, with 159 of that being hardware secure and 266 of that being staff secure. So again, if you compare that to the numbers I listed as of September 8th, we had 145 DCS kids in hardware secure and 215 in staff secure. So, as you compare that to the total capacity. And then finally, this last slide, or we got two more, excuse me. These are the juvenile detention centers that we contract with to occasionally place kids usually while they're waiting to get into one of those other staff secure or hardware secure facilities. So these aren't all the juvenile detention centers across the state. These are just the ones that may have a DCS, juvenile justice youth in them. So a kid that's been committed to our custody. These numbers, again, are as of September 6th. So in Madison County on September 6th, there was one juvenile justice kid at the juvenile detention center. Williamson County, there were 0. The higher numbers in Knox County on that day, there was 17 juvenile justice youth in Knox County, and there were 13 in Shelby County. So the numbers, I think this was on 2 days after the other numbers I said, but there were like 43 kids in juvenile detention centers on that day. And then finally, our assessment centers. These are a fairly new facility that we have been utilizing. So there are 3 different assessment center cottages in Nashville. Those will have, at any given time, I didn't have a current number there, they will have a maximum of 4 juvenile justice DCS youth in those facilities. Same with the Gallatin Primary Assessment Center as well. We will have occasionally a few more in the Bartlett Primary Assessment Center. I believe on September 6th, we had 22 juvenile justice youth at that location on that day. So looking sort of to the future on, the capacity needs moving forward, we've been very fortunate that over the last few years, the Tennessee General Assembly has approved and funded a comprehensive DCS plan to construct several new DCS facilities, both on the juvenile justice side and the dependent and neglected side. over $300 million has been allocated to construct a new staff secure facility at Woodland Hills in Nashville and a new hardware secure and staff secure facility at Wilder in Somerville, Tennessee. So that $300 million will go to all three, building all three of those facilities. The Woodland Hills property is located right next to the Standing Tall property that you see there. And the Standing Tall facility will continue to operate. The Woodland Hills facility is planned to have approximately 72 beds. The two new Wilder facilities will be built on the current Wilder campus, and the current Wilder facility will continue to operate until those facilities are completed. The Wilder hardware secure facilities plan to have approximately 72 beds, while the staff secures plan to have approximately 48 beds. So that will bring over 150 new beds as far as the post-adjudication side. And they will be constructed so that additional beds can be added to if there is an influx of youth in the system. So that's, again, high level, the current availability of housing and other treatment facilities for post-adjudication offenders that have been committed to DCS custody. And with that, I'll pass along to Matt.
Well, good afternoon, Chairman Yeager. Good to see you again, members of the commission. Happy to be back this afternoon. It's really an honor to help present briefly on the work that we're doing specific to the juvenile justice population. It's also an honor to be a part of this panel. I've worked with several of the judges here, and they're for the best. And Jim's not too bad himself. So anyway, with me in the audience is our Director of Juvenile Justice, Elizabeth Reeve, as well as our Assistant Commissioner for Children and Youth Mental Health, Beth Goodner. So our department has a long history in supporting children and youth, but it wasn't really until 2018 that our department got involved with this specific population. So as you can see here on the slide, in 2018 was the year that the Juvenile Justice Reform Act was passed by the legislature. And in that act, there was $4.5 million appropriated in recurring funds to help divert youth and families from further juvenile court and DCS involvement. I remember when this bill was being discussed, we were brought into the conversation, and having such a track record of working with children and youth, especially taking an early intervention approach, we were asked to participate in this. And of course, we said yes. You can see in 2023, based on the success of our diversion programming, we received another $1.3 million in new recurring funding to increase the budget for this work. As the slide indicates here, the primary purpose of the juvenile justice reform grants administered by our department is to expand community-based diversionary programming and provide treatment options for juvenile courts to utilize across the state, specifically services and training that are evidence-based and outcomes-oriented. I know Judge Calloway talked a little bit about the importance of evidence-based work. Since the beginning of our involvement with juvenile justice diversion, we have partnered very closely with the Department of Children's Services, the Administrative Office of the Courts, the Tennessee Council of Juvenile and Family Court Judges, as well as the Tennessee Commission on Children and Youth. They've been very key partners in what we're doing. And I remember 7 years ago having a meeting with all of these stakeholders to say, how can we best use these funds to serve young people in our state? And their feedback really has guided our work up until today. This slide here shows you a map of where we're offering these services. As you can see here in the notes, the grant funds became available shortly after the appropriation was provided in 2018. We released an announcement of funds, a grant application process for providers to apply against. And we actually partner very closely with the judges and other key partners on developing the announcement of funding. And I'll talk here shortly about the goals of this program. As you can see, 6 grantees were selected back in 2019. These are tried and true community mental health providers, organizations like Youth Villages, Tennessee Voices, who Hannah referenced, Cary Counseling Center, Volunteer Behavioral Health Care System, the McNabb Center, and Frontier Health up in the Northeast. Since we've started with our diversionary programming, over 7,000 youth have been served by these providers. A really important note here on this slide is that services are available to youth regardless of payer source. So this is a payer agnostic program. We know that over 50% of the children in our state are covered by TennCare. Approximately 45% have commercial insurance. There's maybe 5% of kids in our state who are uninsured. But this program serves all kids who may need diversionary work in their communities. Here you can see the program goals, the header states program goals. You can't really see it, but I'll read through these really briefly. The first is to divert youth from juvenile courts from further penetration into the juvenile justice system using community-based services rather than commitment to state custody. The second goal is to establish, expand, and strengthen partnerships between juvenile courts, between community behavioral health providers, child welfare, local schools, youth, and families. That was something that I think the juvenile court judges early on really wanted to see be born out of this grant initiative. And then the third goal was something that I remember Judge Irwin from Knox County bringing up when we were developing this program. We wanted to ensure that these programs helped ensure the resiliency, well-being, and overall connectedness to the community for juvenile justice involved youth. The targeted population I've touched on a little. It's really kids who are pre-adjudication that have committed lower level offenses. As you can see here, these are children that have been referred to the juvenile court for delinquency charges. There's a risk of commitment to DCS with these children. Also, the children served by, the youth served by this program are those who have previously been on probation, pretrial diversion, juvenile diversion, are involved in pre-custodial programs or aftercare, and have reoffended or are at risk of being placed in DCS custody. And last but not least, children who have been deemed unruly or truant can also be served by the Juvenile Justice Diversion Program to prevent, again, these children from being placed into state custody. Here are the targeted outcomes of our juvenile justice diversion programming. The first is reducing the annual rate of out-of-home placement. That's been a primary goal of the providers and of this collaboration to keep children out of state custody when and where possible by providing these community-based services. Cost savings, we know that it's often much more cost efficient to serve a youth and their family in the community than it may be in a youth detention center. Improved quality of outcomes, again, going back to some of that early discussion that I remember Judge Irwin talking about, and then a reduction in recidivism. Here you can see our outcomes from this past fiscal year 25. They're notable. So of the youth served in fiscal year 25, 99% remained in their home. So they're not moving forward through the adjudication process. They're not coming into state custody. There was a 7% recidivism rate. We're following up with these youth 6 months after they complete their program. And that's how we're determining that recidivism rate. And then you can see improvements in just daily living activities. Our program evaluation team have assessed for this since the beginning. You see improvements in coping skills, communication, and just overall behavior among the young people served through our program. And I believe that's it. I wanted to be brief and short, but happy to answer any questions. Thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
And members, do we have any questions for the panelists? Mayor Frank?
First of all, I love hearing about that program, and I would like to hear from one of the judges if you like this program, the diversion program, and if you think it's working. Then two more questions. One for Judge Brigham. Is that how you pronounce your name? Yes, sir. So you mentioned some stories of immediate threat scenarios. And so for our adult detention centers, offenders are housed based on a classification model, and that can include something like a single cell where they're under constant surveillance monitoring for a health or behavioral issue. And I don't know, I'm not a lawyer and haven't played one on TV. So I'm wondering, in those type of high threat scenarios for public safety, are we able under the law to house such a juvenile in an adult facility for a short term? And I know that the law does allow juveniles to be charged as adults. So I'm wondering if there are scenarios where a juvenile could be housed, obviously in a separate type scenario, for a temporary period of time under those high threat scenarios. And then my last question would be, so the public chapter 418 that asked for this study is asking about the need for additional capacity, and most everyone here today said there is such a need. So I will want to kind of focus in on whether that is private or public and the size of those facilities. So my mother, she spent time as an advocate for CASA. One of her main concerns was her children were at a larger facility, and she expressed often to me the concern she had, the experiences her children were having at those facilities. It wasn't about the staff or the guards, but it was about the other juvenile offenders that were in that facility. So I'm wondering, in terms of that and the developing mind, what is a better answer there, public, private, and the size of the facility? And I do not have an answer. I don't have an opinion on it. I'm genuinely wanting to know. So that's all, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
You want me to take a shot at it? Okay. First of all, yay, CASA. Yeah. We got a CASA in Stewart County. It took me 14 years, but we got a CASA in Stewart County, and I love it. But CASA is on the DNN side, you know, the children that are abused, and we're talking about JJ kids here, juvenile justice kids. But right now, the law is that we cannot put a kid in an adult facility. There has to be total separation of sight and sound. And that's not only in the cell, but also in the common areas like cafeterias, booking, and that kind of thing. So generally speaking, no, ma'am, we can't do that. Now, it's very interesting that you bring that up, because I'm a kind of a nerd kind of guy, and I was looking at some history, some reports from the early 90s and the late 80s, and there were kids in jails at that time. In fact, 8 or 10,000 kids at that time, if that data is solid. I'm not sure that it is. But now that's a big no-no. When we choose to detain, there's a statute, 37-1-114, 37-1-116. It tells us kind of how to do that and which kids qualify for detention. And it's really a last resort for us, because all of our council members know that that's probably an adverse childhood experience being put into juvie, a lockup. So I know for me, we go to great lengths to avoid locking a kid up. It's expensive for the county. $450 a day. Can you believe that? Or right now we're paying $250, which is expensive. When I started, it was $112 a day. And plus the sheriff has to go and transport these kids to and from court, to and from doctor's appointments and assessments and so forth. So it's very expensive. The murder suspect that we had locked down was a 3-hour trip one way to the detention center. And so that was a huge amount. But I know, speaking for every council member I know, it's a last resort, because we know it's a big deal and it can be very traumatic for a kid. And sometimes they come out more streetwise than when they went in. And so, but safety of the public, that's what we're focusing on in this pre-adjudication phase. Not so much risk of flight. It's been my experience that most of the time kids do come to court. I don't know what their experience in the larger cities are, but public safety, when you have a firearm pointed at you, and so we need these facilities in order to take control of the situation and calm things down. I'm not sure I answered any of your question, but there it is. I'm going to let some of these other experts.
In regard to the question about public-private, the facility that we're looking to build in the Western District would be every county surrounding that right now has to ship them across the state. Their parents don't get to see them. We have, as you could see, 7 beds that were on that last sheet. It would be paid through, the county would build the facility on our property. There's a pending House bill which precipitated this to determine that we do have a need. And I think 7 beds certainly is that need, but it would be a facility where we would also, and I wouldn't agree otherwise, to work with the mental health. Huge CASA, was the first president of CASA before I became judge, was involved with that. And to look at more holistic approach, keeping the gang members separate, making it, I mean, obviously, we have to be careful because so many people go, I guess you're going to just read to them and sit around and everything's going to be great. No, but we are going to provide them, they are children. And I think sometimes people forget that we're dealing with children. Now, they're children that may have done some horrible, horrible thing, but they're still innocent until proven guilty. So the facility that we're talking about would be a private facility owned by the county, and it would have 48 beds and would be around 70 million. If we'd have done it a few years earlier, it would have been a whole lot less, but nobody listens to me. So that's kind of where we are with that. I think everybody deals with their detention centers differently, but that's what we're looking at doing in the Western region and making it a regional, not just Jackson, because we're the hub city. If anybody runs out of gas that steals a car between Memphis and Nashville, they're going to end up in Jackson. That's just, you can pretty much mark that. But that is what our goal is. And I think every area of the state is just so different. But that is our goal, our hope, and our prayer for that. I don't know if that answered your public versus private.
And then Mayor Frank, if I can add on the size, I think your mother is absolutely right. The bigger the size, the more problems.
Yes.
And so if the facilities could be smaller in number, if you put one child that's on the borderline and you put him in a facility that only has 8 youth that you're working with at a time, that has a better opportunity of being more restorative and more rehabilitative versus if you put that one child in a facility that holds 130, that child's probably going to end up in the same direction that the other 129 are going. And so the smaller the facilities, the better, but there's definitely a need for facilities.
Yes, and Judge Phil, y'all reminded me of another part of your question, which I probably ignored. But the intercept or the prevention money that came out of JJRA in 2018, yes, it has worked in Stewart County. We use Youth Village's Intercept program. And before then, I didn't really have an option to put somebody in the home that does what they do. So yes, that's been a fantastic program. And if you could triple it, that'd be great.
Senator Yarborough, you're recognized.
Thank you. And I'll start just by saying, Judge Brigham, I appreciate everybody on the panel and the work that you're doing, which is just massively hard. But I was particularly taken by the sort of the dilemma of, like, I've got to keep people in the community safe from a present threat versus like kind of the recognition of like this is going to be traumatic and significant possibility that they're actually going to learn more about how to be a better criminal in if they're actually detained. And I mean, and that's pretty backed up by data across the country. But I guess, I understand we have to increase the capacity, but how do we get to a place where whatever our capacity is less likely to lead to individuals learning to be better criminals at this moment when they are literally in our custody, right? Like they are in like our collective custody. How do we actually make that not be the case? What are the steps that might be helpful towards, and do we have a sense of, which facilities are better or worse at that? Is there data? Like how do y'all think through this from a court perspective.
Yeah, you just answered your own question there. Data. What you all are doing here, I've told Judge Philyaw, this is once in a generational opportunity for us to talk about this. You're not going to want to do this 5 years from now, redo this. This is amazing. And we are so grateful that you guys are doing this. But you also point out the need for data. Assess the services that are being provided in these facilities now and see what that data shows. I don't know what services are being provided in these facilities, but I do know that services like we just saw, 99% remain in the home. Now, maybe half of those wouldn't have gone into custody anyway, but I guarantee you some of that number would be in state's custody right now. I know in Stewart County that program is effective. I've seen it with my own eyes. I was skeptical at first. I was part of that JJRA discussion back in 2018, and I was kind of skeptical about that, but I'm not so skeptical anymore. So assess the services that are being provided now and see what that turns up.
Well, yeah. Oh, I thought there was another answer over there, but it's fine. Yep, it's fine.
Patiently, yes. First of all, as a retired law enforcement officer and as an attorney, I really appreciate the work that you do for your local community and for our state. So really do appreciate you. One thing that the study may answer it as well, but I thought while you're here, I might ask you is there another different states model that doesn't mainly depend on the local governments as heavily for the detention? And how frequent are you unable to detain violent youth? That's just my question.
Mr. Peach, would you repeat the second question there, please?
How frequently are you unable to detain someone because you don't have room?
On a daily basis. And sadly, all the local counties, we haven't been able to accept any of them in months and months and months because the crime, although everybody says the crime rate's down, serious crime rate is going through the roof, and you see it all the time with the murder. My executive director who runs the detention center, TJ King, and myself sit up most every night at 2:00 in the morning and discuss. We have two children in one bed. Both had loaded AKs. Which one we look to see which one's been there before, which one was positive for drugs, and which one we think's family, will be more involved in helping us keep them on house arrest until we can figure out what to do next. And we made that decision a few months ago and sent the one home that the parents absolutely said there's no way we would let this child out. And within 2 days, we got a call from the funeral home, Mercer Funeral Home, saying, could we send someone up to take off his ankle monitor because he was deceased and they needed to take his body. He's 15, his body to the morgue in Nashville because he had been shot and his parents had let him walk down he was at his house, but he was in the driveway. So we make those tough decisions just like you did as a police officer every single day. But in our region, 8 beds is just not enough for our county, but certainly for all the smaller counties that are having much more serious crime and unable to get that help. So I would never want to lock a child up and wouldn't if it wasn't the very last resource. And the difference is that I'm going to focus on the mental health piece. That one piece that we don't have that we need to spend more money on. Every child we have usually is functioning on one of the lowest levels, and sometimes are found to not even be competent Most of them are on the spectrum at some point. We have a year waiting list to get to Levon, or 1 year. And so we need more services, and we're going to provide a whole wealth of those services through pathways, through, I know you met Vicki Lake this morning, and through the West Tennessee Healthcare to be able to do that, and also allow these small counties to not have to transfer them for forensics and other mental health. And I think if we don't work hard on this mental health issue, which we see every single day in all these horrible things that we're seeing on TV, it breaks my heart. We're certainly going to see it get worse. I see a light at the end of the tunnel when I know we can provide that, plus education, plus other services, and not treat them the same as the adults are being treated in the jails. But if that answers what you were looking for, I'm sorry if I didn't, but I tried.
Thank you so much. Thank you all for what you do, and thank you for the presentation. It was fabulous. My uncle was a juvenile judge in Sumner County for 32 years,
Wow.
and so I've lived with the stories for a long, long, long time. But there's a couple of things I think our police chief would appreciate me kind of adding to the conversation, just because it's a local government concern.
Mm.
One is that we repeatedly see juveniles who get arrested, and then when the parents, follow up, they can't believe that we've actually charged them because they've been released in other jurisdictions. They've just gotten a citation, whatever the circumstance is. So that would be, one issue I think he would want me to relay. Two is that, well, let's see my list here. The chief another complaint from him would be that, and I've gotten this call so many times in the morning, we arrested so-and-so last night. We couldn't detain him. There were no beds. I mean, that is very, very frequently a circumstance that we deal with in Sumner County. We had a circumstance, and this is the thing that I just never forget, is we had a child who had been charged with something fairly seriously, was on home detention, was supposed to be monitored by a parent, and got murdered because he wasn't being monitored by the parent, and there was some kind of gang issue that was going on, and he was not at home, and he was murdered in the community. And so that is very, very frustrating. So my question related to that, and you kind of inadvertently mentioned it in your answer a minute ago because you talked about the ankle monitor. And so I wonder if at the very least there could at least be some kind of monitoring when they are sent somewhere with some detention.
And
No,
I didn't want to step.
no.
We all use ankle monitors, I believe. DCS uses ankle monitors, but y'all need to update your ankle monitors. The children know, they go, I want one of those DCS ones because they can get them off. And we know that. It's like keeping ahead of the child concept, but ankle monitors help in the misdemeanors and some of the other offenses, and the children do not like them. I say it pays to accessorize, but they don't like that accessory most of the time. But and we can bring them in for a violation of court orders if they don't do what they're supposed to do. But getting them to charge the battery is very difficult. Also, we currently have 19 on ankle monitors. We have the ability to have more, but the parents won't follow up with what they're supposed to do. And our staff has to monitor 24/7, 365. And DCS doesn't have the manpower to do that. Our staff tries, but obviously we missed the one that died. And the children, children know when they're on ankle monitors, they learn some of the tricks of the trade, and we have to switch them up quite a bit. The ankle monitors do tell us where they are. However, they do not tell us who they're with and what they're doing.
Mhm.
So 9 times out of 10, basically what they do is solve a crime for the police.
Well, then, and that is helpful. But then the other thing that we have seen a lot of, particularly with these smaller rashes of petty crimes like car break-ins, is that they have charges in every other jurisdiction.
Exactly.
It's like they want to commit as much crime as they possibly can before they actually suffer the consequences of their actions. And then just kind of for the children's services, we have a facility in our city where it's actually children from other states coming to the facilities because the runners or for whatever reason. And it has had 3 different owners in my time in office. And the one thing I wanted to say about that was it really does matter. It really does matter who runs the facility, because we went through a period of time there where we had so many problems, and it wasn't necessarily the level of crimes the kids were committing. It was the ownership and the staffing of the center. That is all. Thank you.
If I may follow up on, I believe it's Mr. Peach's first question. The question was, are any other states paying for pre-adjudication detention? And I think that's a good question. And I just wanted to let you know that we don't have the answer to that, but we'll try to find out, and maybe TACIR may have an ability to do that. I don't know, but we don't know. Here in Tennessee, it's always fallen on the counties to burden that, to shoulder that expense. And we're just not sure about the answer to that question.
I'd like to follow up on that because one of you 2 judges commented on this in your remarks, and I was curious about the expense of the juvenile who has been charged and then put into a facility. So the county picks up the expense, the per diem for that. Until there's been an adjudication.
Until basically there's been a trial or
and how long is that period of time as a rule?
It depends. Typically, juvenile cases move much quicker than adults.
Yeah.
And so, we try to get those cases heard and finished within 30 days if we can. But I'll just be honest. If it's a murder case, if it's a transfer matter, if there's got to be evaluations done and getting an attorney to take the case and, exchange of discovery and then potentially plea negotiations, I sometimes have them up to 90 days in my 26-bed detention unit in Chattanooga.
And I heard 2 numbers here of the cost per day of keeping a juvenile. One was $250, and the other was in excess of $400. Is this a reasonable spread? Or you're keeping somebody in your court for 90 days? It's going to cost you somewhere between $200 and $300 a day.
40 years ago, Hamilton County built a 26-bed detention unit. It's old, it's decaying, it needs to be replaced. But the county runs that. And so Hamilton County runs that. Judge Brigham, for example, does not have a detention unit in his county, and most counties don't. So he has to pay somebody else to hold his youth. And I believe what he said was, and y'all can correct me, I believe what he said was he's been paying about $250 a day for that care. And Judge Callaway's got a new facility coming online, and she's calculated her costs are going to be much higher. Is that fair?
I would like, Mr. Director Lickford, as a staff, I'd like to see the data on this, what the cost to the counties is, because I'm hearing that there is a range of cost because of different variables different to the respective counties. I realize that it will be the state's responsibility to build the center, but I'm hearing that it's the county's responsibility to pay the cost of keeping the child in the center, at least until adjudication. And then, correct me if I'm wrong, once the adjudication has occurred, does that cost shift to the state, or does it still stay with the county?
Yes, sir. Post-adjudication, we commit a child sometimes to the Department of Children's Services, and then it becomes an obligation of the state.
All right. I hope that staff I'd like to see those numbers. Now, that could be a terrific expense to the counties. I'd like to see that if staff can provide those numbers, please. And I believe that there was a follow-up to one of Senator Yarborough's earlier questions that I moved on to someone who had been waiting. Was there another question for Senator Yarborough? Senator Yarborough, you're recognized, sir. I apologize for moving, but we'd had a gentleman who'd been waiting quite a while.
Oh, no, I
But it's your
appreciate
nickel
that.
now, sir.
Well, no, I mean, first, I just think I appreciate you letting this hearing go because this is the exact kind of information we need. The one piece, if I could follow up, I completely agree that it's good for us to get the actual cost data and sort of understand how that goes. But I also don't want to lose sight of what the kind of recidivism and long-term cost data is, right? Like if you've got a facility that's got 75% of its people are going to be joining TDOC's state-run facilities at some point, they start becoming 40, several $100,000 over the course of a lifetime versus, a slightly lower recidivism rate in those juvenile facilities just has massive long-term budgetary consequences. And I think this is exactly the kind of thing where you want to avoid being like penny wise and pound foolish in trying to make sure that like managing cost here. Nobody wants to spend too much money, but we also don't want to spend so little money that we're guaranteeing that we're spending more incarceration money in the long run. And I guess Mr. Lehman, I think the other piece I wanted to get to was, and this, if anybody else wants to comment on it as well, like, does the state's role of sort of licensing facilities actually make sense, if you will, like versus actually paying attention to like what they're doing from a performance perspective? Like how many students are actually like getting their high school degrees while they're detained? How many are getting treatment for known mental health problems while they're detained? How many are being rearrested within short time frames from being released from that facility? Because I think sort of thing, if I'm just meeting like a checklist of licensing requirements, how does the state use that as a management tool to actually end up with the kind of detention that doesn't just lead to recruitment centers for the vice lords, but actual interventions that might make a difference?
Thank you, Senator, for the question. And before I answer that, I wanted to say too, I showed a slide earlier. There's a dozen or so juvenile detention centers that we contract with. I believe our going rate is $185 a day. So if we have a DCS kid at one of those facilities, I think that's what we typically pay. 184, excuse me, 184.
We count our pennies.
To Senator Yarborough's question, I would say, that we do everything that we can within the parameters that we've been provided in statute, right? So is there, additional things that can be done in statute to make sure that we're checking for, additional things and that kind of thing? I would say as far as the educational standards, I believe most of that is up to DOE to check on, Department of Education. I could be wrong. Sammy she's confirming that's right. But as far as, what standards we have applicable to those facilities, I think our current rules are 50 plus pages of standards of, what the plant must look like, what staffing ratios there have to be, what services have to be available, that kind of thing. We have been in the process for a couple of years now of updating those standards. They do need to be updated. We made it all the way to the Government Operations Committee almost 2 years ago now. Ended up having to pull those to make a couple of tweaks to make sure that they would get approved by the committee. Those rules are currently with the Attorney General's office, so we are hopeful that those new standards will come online in the next couple of months. And those will just be more updated and modern standards to make sure that those kids, are getting all the services that they should. The thing I would note is that juvenile detention centers, for the most part, are supposed to be temporary in nature, right? So there can be limitations on how robust all the services that they receive can be, but we do want to make sure they're getting education, getting all the clinical assessments that they need, and all that kind of thing. So.
And thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I'll just say, for the report perspective, I appreciate that a lot. But I do think that we try and figure out what data we are looking at would be great, so that if we're going to expand our capacity, it'd be good to know what capacity should be expanded versus which capacity should be curtailed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gosh, you guys see the worst of us all the time. Every day you have to make heartbreaking decisions that you have to take home with you. You got a tough job. So thanks not just for being here today, but thanks for the work that you do every day, dealing with what you have to deal with. I've got a lot of questions. I'll try to make them real short, Mr. Chairman. But first of all, in Tipton County, we're paying hotel bills for juveniles that are higher than the Peabody hotel rate in Memphis. And I'm tired of that. I hear from law enforcement officers out on the street that, listen, these juveniles, they're being convinced by hardened criminals to commit the crime for them because why? Those guys got no place to put you. And so I think that very fact has caused some rise in juvenile crime. I'm hearing that on a regular basis from law enforcement officers in my area. Right out of the gate, when you get to the gateway, when you get to you guys, we don't have places to put these folks. I mean, pre-adjudication, we just don't have places to put them. And so before you ever get into diversity, anything else in this program, we've got to have places to put these folks on a temporary basis so we can make the best decision. But I've got janitor staff that calls my office and says, listen, we can't clean the courthouse. We can't clean the courtroom today. When this morning, there's a law enforcement officer that's there with the juvenile. They stayed in the courtroom last night. So there's a critical need for pre-adjudication beds where I'm from. Here's some of the questions that I have. If we were to build a juvenile detention facility in any grand division in the state, that's going to take a while. And you all maybe have touched on this. If you draw a radius around Tennessee, we're bordered by multiple states. Has it ever been considered, or is it possible now, or who makes the decision if County A in West Tennessee can contract with the county in Arkansas or North Mississippi or Southern Kentucky? Is that something that's doable now? Or are there objects to that? Or is there a reason why that couldn't be done if the contract were worked out between the local Tennessee county and the county and state A, B, or C? Anyone know the answer to that? In other words, if I'm looking for pre-adjudication beds, a place to put them, rather than take them to Sevier County, Mayor Waters told me today they've got, I think, 26 beds over there, and he thinks they've got 4 people in them. But that is a long way across Tennessee. Well, if there's Crittenden County, Mississippi, across the Mississippi River, can Tipton County contract to keep pre-adjudication juveniles in Crittenden County, Arkansas?
My guess,
For example,
would be no, because they would have different, obviously, juvenile court laws. We now have serious youth offenders that have to be housed separately. You're going to have violations. Plus, I think every state's in about the same situation that we are, in that they don't have the beds. Plus, they don't really want our. Sometimes they'll say they don't want our messes. I said, God doesn't make any junk, but you're going to have to work with us on this. And I would imagine that they're going to stick our state with much higher rates as some of these providers do that are outside the state. It's unbelievable what we're paying right now for those posts. We were 185, 184 for the state. Now we are, as of July 1st, we're $200 a day. And we also handle ICE and the other, since we're doing TBI, FBI, ICE, and other major facilities, I mean, major individuals and companies, such as well, I know TBI uses us quite a bit, as well as now we're seeing a lot of immigration. We're the only immigration in the state. I can't imagine that any of the states around us would touch it. Would even
Pre-adjudication
begin
of juveniles.
pre-adjudication of juveniles, unless the price was right. Now, if you want to pay $700 or $800, I'm sure they'd be more than happy to do that, because some people are paying that now in Tennessee, where we're charging 200. I can't imagine. You're paying 12 to 1,500 plus for a child that has special needs, and that's low. So if you want to go out of the state and check to see what they're going to charge you, then I would venture to say the hotel is horrible, but is not going to be feasible to do that. And I don't know that it would even or could be done. I've never checked that, because that was never something that would have affected us.
Does anyone know on the panel, theoretically, if it were doable in terms of economics, are there any regulations that would stand in the way of that, or how would that work?
Yeah, Mayor, I've been checking with our general counsel, Sammy Mayfair's in the office. We can come back to you to let you know for sure, but we don't think there's anything prohibiting it. There are a couple of laws at play. The ICPC, the Interstate Compact for Placement of Children, would be involved. We have a whole team of people that do that when kids from, our custody go to another state, or kids that are in custody in another state come to Tennessee. And then ICJ is the Interstate Compact for Juveniles. So they're different in that there's varying levels of red tape there as far as, the movement of those children. But we believe that it's probably possible, again, if it's economically
But you
feasible.
see my point. If I can cross the river at the bridge and go to Crittenden County,
Sure.
Arkansas, versus Sevier County, that's, you got to have an officer in the whole works. There's a lot of difference in terms of costs that I could, the county could absorb. The second thing I wanted to talk is about, Mr. Chairman, and that is not just the rate that we have to pay, but the length of time now for juveniles seems to be longer. And I think some of it's got to do with the requirements for a state psych test. Now, explain to me how that works is in terms of whether or not a judge is going to require a psych evaluation test for a juvenile, how that works, whether it has to be a state service, or whether you can privatize that, or how would you speed that process up if you could?
If there's a transfer filed, a petition is filed, then there has to be a determination whether or not that child is mentally ill or committable to an institution for the mentally ill. And therefore, forensic has to be ordered, and pathways is covered up, and they do them as quickly as possible. That's why we were going to have them on site, so all the counties could use them and have someone on site to be able to do it.
So that would be part of
more
what
quickly.
Madison County is talking about. You'd have your own service there.
Yes.
That would be a private service, or would that be a
It
state?
would be pathways.
Okay.
Pathways. And so they would bill 10 care. And that's how we have done that. And certainly we can do the monitor so that the judges can speak to the client without having to bring them back and forth until the hearing, if they choose to do that, where they would have them on a screen. And, other things like that we could work out, and that issue about Crittenden, it might help your problem, but it's not going to help the problems of these very, very rural towns like that, Crockett County or others, where, it might as well be in Timbuktu. It's not going to make any difference. And by the time you do an ICJC, even if you can get one of those Reg 6s and all this stuff you have to get to hurry them up, you're talking a minimum of 6 to 8 months. So I don't know, but the biggest problem with that is, and CASA would know this more than anything, is You got a child, even if it's in Tipton County, how can that parent visit that child? We have people, we have visitation every night. How can a parent go visit a child in another state when they don't have public transportation to even get to the detention center? And we were going to also, that was one of the things we were going to look at, is trying to help to get those parents there, because it makes such a huge difference in the psyche of those children to be able to see mom and dad, especially if they're 13 and charged with first-degree murder. And we have 2 of those. So we have to look at that. I think the going outside the state would not be anything the Western District would want, in my opinion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just one last question, if I could. If there's a local area, if a local town has got space in its justice center, for example, that says, listen, we can temporarily, hold juveniles here. This can be a pre-adjudication facility here. The town's got it. Now, we don't know how that process works, getting that approved. How does that process work? Who comes in and decides what that town has got to do to be able to use that facility for pre-adjudication holding?
That'd be our licensing team. Yeah, they'd have to, show that they're meeting all the rules and regulations that we have promulgated about what standards a juvenile detention center has to meet in order to operate. Yep.
In a temporary facility, are there educational requirements?
I'm not sure about the education. There are the temporary
Yes.
holding. Yeah, Judge Little would know. I know they're only supposed to be there up to 72 hours, but I guess. Yeah.
Right. Are you talking about temporary, like 72 hours? You're talking
Yes.
about
Yes.
they still have to have the educational requirement met, and the school system would either would have to provide a licensed teacher, and then they, and no offense, but the checklist of what you have to have is unbelievable. We have worked years and years and years just trying to come up with a plan that would work for our county, and with less beds, and it is phenomenal, the requirements that it takes right now. I don't even know how many requirements you have, but it is unfathomable what it's going to cost to get all that done. And I've lived it a long time, and it's really difficult. It's really difficult.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. You're quite welcome. Are there others before we bring the curtain down? No other questions? I really appreciate the panel. I wish that we had a Nobel Prize for general sessions and juvenile judges. What you do is just so good. We appreciate your service, and if there ever was a public service, it's our juvenile judges. What you deal with every day takes a special person, and we've seen that through your testimony today. So thank you very much for what you do and for your sharing your thoughts and recommendations with us today. We deeply appreciate it, and we'll give it very serious consideration. With that, members, I will turn the podium back over to Director Lippard. I think we have a matter of other business. Is that correct?
That's correct, Chairman. And actually, the only other business is setting our next meeting date, which will not be next month, as stated earlier. And we'll be polling the members. Plan on, if you're looking at your calendars, we'll, as we normally do with the winter meeting, we'll try to plan something for early December. Actually, it's technically our fall meeting, but.
Any questions? Are there any questions for the director? Thank you very much, members. Thank you for coming today and your participation. And there's no further business to take. We will stand in adjournment.